Hi everyone, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with a very special guest in our New York studio. I'm here with Yaki Faitelson, who is the CEO and co-founder of a very cool cybersecurity company called Varonis, also located here in New York. Yaki, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Ed. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Hey, we're going to talk about technology, we're going to talk about startup, we're going to talk about all sorts of things, but just to start, why don't you give us a couple words about Varonis? What do you guys do? I think for people tuning in, it'll be good to level set what you guys are all about.
Varonis is a data protection company, and in my opinion, we have the most practical platform to solve the complex problem of protecting your digital assets. And essentially, we are doing three things very well. One is making sure that only the right people can access the right data. The second thing, we want to make sure that they are using it properly. So with high fidelity, we can alert on any abnormal behavior and get to the root cause of the problem. And the third thing is to tell you what is critical to classify your assets and report on any privacy and compliance, any regulation that is related to your data.
Yeah, it's funny when you say digital assets nowadays, you don't even have to say digital anymore. Like most businesses would say that their assets are virtual, it's their data. In the old days, it might have been your factories and your buildings, and now it's those digital assets. That's really the power of a business, of value, right?
Evidently, Ed, is today, if you look at the overall economy, what is moving it forward more than anything else is information.
Yeah.
And if you take a car today, just the crude parts of the car, they are nothing. What the secret sauce is how you assemble it. And you see with some cars today that even the software is much more important than the hardware itself. And we have organizations become each other information banks. And like in the monetary system, you really need to make sure that you are protecting your information. And with everything that is happening in the world, every day we are more dependent on information. It's becoming more critical. There are much more collaboration requirements. You can do it much easier. So this constant tension between productivity and security is something that every organization needs to manage in order to survive and thrive. This is something that is essential.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's go back. Let's go back to when you were first conceiving the company. What was the driving sort of fire in the belly where you said, well, I'm going to go get this, I'm going to start this company and chase this problem? What was the prompt?
It really hit me in the face. In a sense of, Ohad and I, the other co-founder, we dealt a lot with just all the stack of IT from, development, operating system, databases, networking extensively. And I worked in a storage company at the time and did some big project in an energy company. And someone deleted a big set of data. So they called me and say, can you tell us who deleted the data? And I said, no. The other thing that they said, can you visualize who has the potential access to the data? And I said, let me try. So we started to work the file systems, and it just took, 2 days. And then we had these groups and nested groups and many ACLs. It was almost impossible to understand who can access what data. And 2 days later, it's also changed by, 10, 15%. Then we try to identify data owners and understand just the magnitude of what we call today the blast radius. So how much data can people access that is not relevant to them? And it was more than 80%. So then the problem was how we remediate the risk. And then how throughout all the estate, it was a big multinational, we can find additional critical data, understand who can access it and remediate it. And I told them, give me 30 people, in 2 years I will not be able to do it. And then in the flight back home, in the airport, I just called him and I told him, this is the most fundamental problem. At the end of the day, the world, when you start a startup, a company, you want to make sure that time will work for you. And what I told him is that data will grow exponentially, will become more critical, and will be concentrated in what we call sanctioned data repository, in central repository. It's the only way that you can extract value from it. And this is a problem that it's worthwhile to dedicate our lives. So we just saw that fundamentally, think about how many thousands of customers you have. And really, 90% of the security efforts are in order to protect the digital assets. And they are doing so many things, but not going from the data backwards. And we just understood that if you can protect the data, the right people can access the right data, understand what is abnormal with high credibility, and you can classify the information assets, it's a huge win.
Now, you're using verbs like protect and secure. That's certainly our wheelhouse. But a lot of this could be inadvertent, right? Like in the situation you mentioned. How do you know, or do you care, if it's malicious or incidental or some other thing, right? The effect is the same. If someone by accident does something or isn't properly trained, it can look like a security incident. Are those different when you were thinking about that problem? Were you immediately thinking malicious, or how did you deal with that?
So the reality, there are mistakes, and you also need to address the mistakes.
Yeah.
What I saw from many, many years of doing it, when there is a mistake that is not malicious, you want to know about it, and then you can remediate the problem, a configuration problem, and you also understand the potential of the damage. And many times also just the user community know that you have this kind of capabilities. But the reality is the way that it's work, I think the easiest way to understand it is ransomware. If you will take the vast majority of ransomware attacks are on file servers. You know, they try to go to the local disk, but we have less and less data on endpoints. So what happened in every organization that don't have a solution like ours, you take a random user from his chair, in day one he can access around 17 million files. Usually 80-90% are not relevant for him. So now think about it, if I just compromise your machine, or you are a rogue insider, think about just the breaches that changed the course of history. Snowden, the WikiLeaks, this was file servers, you know, that you had somebody with excessive access control that took a lot of data and no one noticed. These are the big breaches. All the ransomware attacks, you have 10,000 endpoints, you just need to bypass one, and there are so many efficient ways to do reconnaissance and stuff like that, so many administrators and programmers that still need to have admin credentials, and then just go and they encrypting massive amount of data because of this blast radius. If only the right people can access the right data, you really eliminated a lot of the problem potential.
So how does the platform work?
You know, we are going to the big data repositories.
Yeah.
So we are going to all your file systems, everything with on the 365 suite, Salesforce, S3, you know, Google, Box. Also the infrastructure that with the closest proximity to the data, Active Directory and Azure AD and Okta, we are also monitoring and have a lot of benefit there. We're also looking at DNS and proxy and VPN to understand infiltration and exfiltration for the data, but the base is the data itself, is the usage at the data store level. So we are coming in, we are doing two things. One, we are going into the data store itself, scan the permissions, it obviously take also the users from the directory services that we are working with, and show you the potential access. Yeah. The second thing that we are doing, we're scanning the data itself, and we tell you what is critical, and then we are doing it incrementally, because you're talking about massive amount of data. The sheer scale is tremendous, and for us, one of the iron rules, it's immediate time to value, and very strong increasing ongoing value. So immediately we can tell you within an hour and a half, 2 hours in big shops, who can access what data, and we start to tell you what is critical and who is touching what data. Then we are profiling the data to do two things, to understand any abnormal behavior, how users are behaving. Obviously, we have all the metadata, so you can do very advanced, sophisticated forensics with ease. We also have an automation engine that can do this remediation automatically. So you can come in, massive data sets. Just think about it, a lot of millions of folders and files, open in organizations. So just you are coming, and we understand how they're using the data, creating the group for you automatically, and remediate everything. So you come into the CISO and you show them, the data was open, we reduced it in 80%, we didn't break any business process, and in the time that we had this tremendous breach in what we call the blast radius, that so much data was open, we were able to alert on any abnormal behavior, so nothing bad happened.
Reducing the attack surface, doing it. Well, do you care when the data is encrypted? Does that reduce the fidelity of what you can do, or does it not really matter?
It's not really matter as long as we can open it, and many times if it's encrypted, exactly. It's the metadata itself, but many times if it's any DRM or PKI, we are coming from the user side, user with credential that can open it, so we see it. It's not an issue for us, and in terms of the usability and the ACLs, it's not encrypted, so it's transparent.
How many of your customers are now scattering things off into SaaS and cloud and just sort of distributing their data to these multiple, very diverse kind of apps and workload hosting?
It's a very, very good question. So the answer is all of them, but most of the data is really in several repositories. So what is very interesting that there is tremendous adoption of the cloud, but at the same time the on-prem data is not going anywhere. So data is going relentlessly on-prem. But the other thing, like with 365, we saw just tremendous adoption of 365 and obviously Azure AD, Teams. And Teams is a very good collaboration product, but it's opening the environment to everyone because you have this abstraction layer and you and I opening a chat, you don't know what is going on. And it's the hands of the end user. So you just see this explosion of links that opening critical data to everyone in the organization. Just regular SaaS application, just a lot of Salesforce. Salesforce contain a lot of critical data and a lot of API connecting to it. In some shops, stuff like Box and Google, developers with things like GitHub, which many times you go there and, obviously you see many red teams, they are going and finding many tokens and users and stuff that are opening, and all the attacks really start there. And also things like Jira and Zoom. So we definitely see an explosion of SaaS. We are going from the data outside. We call it the data first approach. We think that you want to protect the data, and we need to be at the data level. We need to manage this constant tension between security and productivity. Everybody wants to collaborate. Everybody wants to make sure that everything will be connected. And this is something that is very hard for the CISO because the organization need to mine this data, need to monetize the data. You need to make sure that you can collaborate many times with, third-party organizations. So this is something that we definitely look at. It's just development processes and code.
Let's dig into third-party. That's probably the number one request we get in our research support. What do I do about suppliers, partners who have access to my data, whether remotely, on-prem, whatever. What kind of guidance can you give, or what kind of support do you give to your customers when they're worried about that third-party risk to their data?
First thing is to make sure that they only can access the data that they should access, and what they can access and what is the data.
If only.
This is the first thing. The other thing, to understand the baseline, how they are using the data, and to see any spike, any abnormal behavior. And if, God forbid, something happened, to be able to pinpoint it very fast and just to get to the root cause. Many times I saw in the last 2 years hundreds and hundreds of incidents. And many times it can be just a very sophisticated ransomware attack. And I think that everybody saw the chat of the Conti group and what data they are going after and all the methods and how easy it is, and with everything that's going on in social media, the reconnaissance. And just, we also saw severe APTs from state actors against just commercial organizations, which this is also a huge issue. So you are coming there, and for me, sometimes it's mind-boggling. So everybody looking at these endpoints and trying to find some, to look at telemetries and stuff like that. The data is open to everybody. No one can say what they did to the data store. You have a Salesforce.com that is just open to the world. No one can say who touched it and what happened. A Box instance that is also open to the whole world, and you have a lot of critical data, you see there a lot of PII. So you really need to make sure that first you have visibility, and every time the posture, the configuration change, you are able to pinpoint it and then to decide what to do with it. And sometimes, Ed, there are, because of legacy constraint, you see configuration that you can't really touch. Then you really need to make sure that if there is any deviation, you see the alerts. You need to live with the risk, but you can understand the usage or any abnormal behavior. So this is what I think about third party. And just collaboration in general.
When people are consuming this visibility, this data, how do they usually translate this to action? Is this the kind of thing where the insight becomes a management initiative? Is it a change to policy? Do they have like a big cleanup process after they've... And another thing I wanted to ask you, part two to that, is the work almost like a Pareto type thing where when you first start using your platform, there's a lot of work and a lot of problems, and then over time, it becomes more like a support and maintenance, or is it going to bounce all over the place?
This is a very good question. So we have what we call the operational plan. So we really, for lack of a better term, maniacal about customer success and maniacal about automation. And you're talking about tremendous data sets. Like, I don't think that in terms of exponential growth, we ever encountered anything that is growing the way that data is going. And so much of the data is critical. And when the data, before it's encrypted by ransomware, no one knows how critical it is. Once it's encrypted, everything was critical. The second thing that we are doing, as you said at the beginning, there is just massive problems because of legacy and people just, carrying this function. So what we are doing, we have a lot of automation, and core for that is our automation engine that you can take domain users, broken access control, the everyone group, now, and stuff like that, and really remediate it automatically. We see how people are using the data, we build a policy, we simulate it in a sandbox, and just with these big swings, we remediate a lot of the problems.
For people watching right now who like this, sounds good, what should they be thinking? Is a POC usually the first step, or how do you get to deployment here? Is it phased? Is it POC? Is it...
Yeah, deployment, but usually the way that we are doing it is via POC. We show you the value. We also show you how we are going to deploy it. We have we have a super strong customer success. So we'll show you exactly how it's going to work. And then we set the progress milestone. We have something, we call it a quarterly business review with the CISO and his team. So we are coming every quarter. We sit around the table, we show you what is going on, what we believe that you need to do differently, ask what we need to do differently, which many times in our partners, we have very strong partner community. We set the goals for the next 90 days, and this is how we execute.
And there's no need to stage. This can be on live infrastructure, right?
Always.
Pulling data.
Always.
Like there's no button that could be pushed here that would break the...
No, nothing.
Yeah, that's always good. I always liked when I knew that I could deploy something, I could sleep at night.
Completely non-intrusive, immediate time to value. And even if you decide not to buy now, you will get a lot of insights and you will understand that the state of your data and the directory services.
Yaki, I have another question I want to ask you about. As we're filming this, there's a lot of geopolitical tension that probably spills over into cyber. What are your thoughts on this? Both things you may be seeing and maybe some predictions about what's coming, even some commentary on maybe the role of all of us to help to keep infrastructure safe. What are you thinking about these days geopolitically?
I think that we see the consequences of a war, and it's extremely problematic. And what you will see more and more, I believe, is cyber warfare. So there is tremendous amount of investment for state actors to be able to be very efficient in cyber warfare. The problem is that this knowledge is really spilling into the commercial world. Now, when you take several nations and you put sanctions on them and you're really choking them, they will try to monetize and really make money through cybercrime. And we also have another element, which is cryptocurrency. So what is happening today, you have a lot of knowledge with state actors that spilling fast into the commercial space. You have sanctions that are driving more and more people to do it, and then you have overall software framework. Think about 20 years ago, what it means to be a really sophisticated a hacker versus today. It's like development. You have so many frameworks and just open source and no code. So anybody that is technologically savvy can be, just a very sophisticated hacker. And also, the insider problem is one of the biggest problem of all. You have a lot of offshores and contractors, and we talked about third party. So most employees are the biggest assets that every organization have. The issue, Ed, is that you just need one rogue employee, one Snowden or what happened at the WikiLeaks. Many times they can be developers with a lot of credentials and just a lot of access and the ability to get situated to do something that is very harmful. So I believe that what will happen is that everybody understands that on the cyberspace, they need to be very sophisticated. So state actors will put tremendous push to be more and more sophisticated, and more countries that traditionally were not very good at it. And you saw that, countries like Germany now putting much more into their army. Big part of it will be cyber.
Double their budget.
Double their budget. Big part of it will be related to offensive cyber, and this spills into the commercial space. By attacking commercial organizations, they can get a lot of critical data, intellectual property, just access to software that is going into different organizations. So I think it's just going to be much harder for the CISO. I think that the CISO will need to know very well how to prioritize risk. He will need to know how to manage productivity and security, a lot of decisions. I think that we'll see scarcity in security talent. So people like us that building products will need to provide just a lot of automation. And you really need to be very thoughtful with just your security spend, because you can do so much and get so little.
Well, those blind spots are particularly bad in government, because government and military, great at offense, and seems like we throw 100 units of time, effort, money, and budget at offense, but we don't seem to spend the same level of time and effort on defense. I think it's harder. And I think that that's always a natural force on, like, young people getting into the business. They all want to hack. Very few of them say, oh, I want to grow up to do compliance. I don't know anybody who ever thinks that. But these are critical functions, and I think that when a nation state's coming at you, you better be thinking defense, not offense, because a hack is not going to keep your infrastructure up and running. You let the military go do the offense. You got to play defense.
I can't agree more, and I think that it's inevitable. I think that it will be very hard to stay in business if you will not think of security as a business enabler.
Right.
Think about the trust that we have in the monetary system in order for it to function. And critical digital assets are as important as money. So you're going today to your bank account, you have the ledger, you know exactly what happened and all the compliance, and then you go into your data sets that are as critical or maybe more, and it's the wild, wild west. Yeah. You can't say anything, and you're spending millions on perimeter security when the most critical data assets are just completely open.
Yeah, I agree 100%.